Breaking news, the UCO implicates the PNV in the Sanchez-era SEPI corruption scheme. Let's get started. Hello everyone and welcome to a new edition of Medidas Cautelares. And the truth is that the corruption of Pedro Sanchez's government doesn't give us a single day of rest. And pay attention because there is a new report from the Central Operative Unit of the Civil Guard related to the so-called SEPI plot or the PSOE sewer plot. You already know that it's a case with those two branches and that it's being investigated by Judge Pedra of the National Court. And pay close attention. Because no less than the Basque Nationalist Party, the PNV, is now implicated in the Sanchista corruption plot of the SEPI. We're going to share this breaking news with you, as always, showing it on screen. By the way, if you haven't done it yet, remember to subscribe to the Medidas Cautelares channel. We've already reached 135,000 subscribers. And you already know that the goal is to reach 150,000 as soon as possible. Now let's share it. On screen, a new report from the UCO. Attention, because it involves none other than the Basque Nationalist Party. The UCO points to the PNV for a bailout of 112 million euros and pay attention to the exact words. Talking to them and having it approved within a week is no coincidence. The Civil Guard confirms a meeting between Antonio Ortuzar, the SEPI network, and the leaders of the company Tubos Reunidos. Let's proceed with this information. The Central Operative Unit, UCO, of the Civil Guard has found messages within the framework of the SEPI network. You already know where the investigation into the rigged contracts and awards related to SEPI is taking place, as well as the dirty dealings of the PSOE. Well, in the context of this procedure, messages have been found by the UCO that directly point to its influence within the Basque Nationalist Party, which would in turn have influenced the decision for the Basque company Tubos Reunidos S.A. received a bailout of 112.8 million euros. The judge of the National Court, Santiago Pedras, ordered a search as part of this case at one of the Tubos Reunidos offices. The Basque company was also bailed out by SEPI in 2021, and according to the investigation, Anxon Alonso, the partner of Santos Cerdan, was involved at Serbinavar. And you already know that in this case, the PSOE fixer Leire Diaz and the former president of SEPI, Vicente Fernandez, are also involved. It is suspected that they may have taken a commission of up to 114,950 euros in exchange for that bailout to Tubos Reunidos. Well, according to the UCO report included in the case file for the SEPI scheme, which was released by the National Court Judge Santiago Pedras, a few days ago last week, the UCO agents say, on November 13, 2021, the Tubos Reunidos file was submitted again to the FAS Management Council, and this time it was approved. The messages found in the Irurog group, which you know was a WhatsApp group that included Leire Diaz, Vicente Fernandez, and Anxon Alonso, point to the SEPI network acting as an intermediary with PNV leaders. And they say verbatim, I don't know how much our intervention influenced things, but I'm sure it did. You talking to the PNV on Tuesday and then having it approved the following Tuesday is no coincidence. Prior to the aforementioned messages, there are messages in which Anxon Alonso is asked to find out what the PNV thinks about the bailout. Their opinion was essential because the Secretary of State, they say, was raising objections. They were referring to the Secretary of State for the Economy, who is part of the SEPI Council. He was said to be influenced by the opinion of Arantxa Tapia, the Minister of Economic Development and Infrastructure. Apparently, according to the messages sent by Vicente Fernandez, the former president of SEPI, his opinion carried less weight than that of the PNV leaders. So, watch out because the Basque Nationalist Party is stepping in. As a result of this approval, and after a series of contacts and meetings between July and November 2021, a contract was formalized between Tubos Reunidos and Mediaciones. Martinez, a shell company used by the businessman Anxon Alonso, Santos Cerdan's partner, to collect alleged kickbacks. On December 1, 2021, through which 60,000 euros per year would be paid, described as the provision of consulting and business development services. These payments were actually a token of gratitude for the services rendered in the context of the bailout, explains this UCO report, which highlights this point. A total payment of almost 115,000 euros, 115,000 euros. 115,000 euros. But pay attention, it doesn't end here. A few years later, in 2024, the scheme would have acted again with Tubos Reunidos to obtain a second aid from SEPI. This had the approval of Santos Jardán through the socialist fixer Lerten, and to obtain it, a meeting was arranged mediated by Anshon Alonso with the top PNV leader Andoni Ortúzar. And it says verbatim, in parallel to these events, Vicente offered on November 27, 2024, to organize a meeting between gathered tubes and representatives of the PNV. Specifically, these messages mention Andoni Ortúzar Arroba Arruabarrena, who was then the president of the party, and Joseba Aurico Echea Vergara, head of organization. The arrangements for organizing this meeting would have been carried out by Vicente through Elena Sanchez Alvarez, having exchanged several emails with her in this regard. Finally, the meeting would have taken place on January 28, 2025, with De las Heras and Vicente attending on behalf of Tubos Reunidos, and Andoni Ortúzar and Joseba Aurico Echea on behalf of the PNV. In this regard, the UCO certifies that the aid request would have been validated. Literally, it says this request in contrast to what had been happening. Unlike the rest of the request or procedures submitted by Tubos Reunidos, this request was resolved in a short period of time. Specifically, on March 21, 2025, the request from Tubos Reunidos received validation from the Economic and Financial Directorate. On March 25, 2025, it received validation from the Legal Affairs Directorate, and on March 28, the FAS Business Committee made a favorable proposal. The request was aimed at postponing a payment of 10 million euros to SEPI. So pay close attention to this new information that we reveal in Medidas Cautelares, because the Central Operative Unit of the Civil Guard implicates none other than the PNV and Andoni Ortúzar. In the context of the corruption scheme, the SEPI scheme, which is being investigated by the National Court Judge Santiago Pedraz, specifically they place the PNV as a key player in the bailout of the company Tubos Reunidos. And it is suspected that those implicated in the SEPI scheme, such as the former president of SEPI, Vicente Fernandez, the businessman Anshon Alonso, and the PSOE fixer Leire Diez, could have received an illegal commission in exchange for facilitating the bailout of this company, Tubos Reunidos. This is the information. As I told you, the information about corruption doesn't stop, and I find it very interesting because it seems like there's never any corruption in the Basque country, but of course there is. Of course there is. But obviously the leaders of the Basque country, the PNV and so on, make a lot of deals with the government. And what happens is that none of the corruption scandals in the Basque country come to light, even though corruption exists there just as it does in the rest of Spain, because corruption is universal and of course it affects all countries and all the autonomous communities in our country. And it seems like nothing ever happens in the Basque country, but of course it does. The problem is that in the Basque country it's covered up. Unlike in other autonomous communities, in the Basque country it's covered up. But that's why we have the Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office and the Central Operational Unit of the Civil Guard. And also in this case, the Judge of the National Court, Santiago Pedraz, to continue investigating this line of inquiry that implicates none other than the Basque Nationalist Party, one of their partners. In the end, one of the parties that allows Pedro Sánchez to stay in power, that allows Pedro Sánchez to remain in La Moncloa. And that's it for this edition of Precautionary Measures with Miguel Ángel Pérez. I hope you enjoyed it. And if that's the case, leave me your comments, your opinions. What do you think? No party or autonomous community is free from corruption, including the PNV and the Basque country. It's different if they try to hide it. That's what the justice system, civil guard and police are for. You already know that you can support this community, this channel of Precautionary Measures with Miguel Ángel Pérez, if you become members like the Chosen Ones for less than €3 a month, or like the Supreme Ones for less than €7 a month. You can also make contributions via Bizum at 627-555-56370, 627-555-56370. And let me today, because today we have to make a special mention because we have new members, new contributions through Bizum. And we also have a special dedication to a great friend of this channel, one of the first. She has been on the front lines from the start, and I have to thank her for that. And also, I had the pleasure of meeting her in person at one of those gigs we do with the radio, with R Radio and Libertad Digital. And my message of affection for Begoña Castro, one of the people who has supported this channel the most from the very beginning. And as I was saying, I had the pleasure of meeting you in person. Thank you so much, Begoña, for your extremely generous contribution via Bizum. Really, thank you so much for your unconditional support and for always being there. Also, Daniel Canales for his generous contribution via Bizum. And also a third member, we have Agustin Garcia, who has become a subscriber as well as a member like the chosen ones. So, today's program is dedicated to all three of them. The most important thing, as I always say, is that this information reaches everyone because information is power. See you soon.